Awesome. All right, let's go into our last but not least segment of the review, which is again the artifacts and the colorless cards. So, starting with artifacts, our first one is Bloodline Pretender. So this is an artifact creature shapeshifter, 3 mana for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever another creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, put a counter on the Bloodline Pretender. Honestly, if you are playing any sort of the tribal strategies that exist in this format, I suspect this card is pretty strong. Like, it is essentially, again, it's an elf, it's a troll, it's a warrior, it's whatever you want it to be. It's a dwarf, it's an angel. And notably, unlike a lot of the other shapeshifters where they're locked into either blue or green, which means they're really mostly only good for the tribes that share those colors. This one you can put in your black-white angel deck, and it's actually just an angel, which is really cool. Then every time you cast another angel, or sorry, it's not even whenever you cast another angel. It's actually just whenever another angel enters the battlefield under your control. So that includes tokens entering, angel tokens being a thing that happens a lot. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think this card is pretty cool. It's a nice little cog piece for the Tribal Matters decks. The next card is Colossal Plow. I had somebody in another Discord that I'm in, a friend of mine, was trying to convince me that this card is good, and I am reasonably sure that that is absurdly not true. This card is interesting and it's humorous, but it's not good. So, Colossal Plow is a 2-mana vehicle, and it's but it has Brew 6. Brew 6 is really hard. Brew 6 is really hard. Whenever Colossal Plow attacks, add 3 white, and you gain 3 life. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So it like ramps you for 3 a turn, but the mana goes away after the turn. You gotta, yes. So I know, okay, so the combo is here. I'm gonna have to go like way back to the top. Way back to the top, way back to the beginning. Where is this stupid cow? Oh my god, where's this done? There we go. Here's our friend, the Giant Ox. So of course, it's a Colossal Plow. So it's, of course, being pulled by a giant ox. Now, you'll note that ox has the very conspicuous text, you can crew using its toughness rather than its power. What is its toughness? 6. It has 0 power. Now, conveniently, crew 6. So, of course, this is like a cute little, like, synergy thing you can try and do. But the problem is, both halves of this combo are terrible individually, and they're only like okay when you combine them, which to me just says, why are you doing this? We can be doing better than that. I think this card is very bad. I think that if you ever put this card in your deck, you are making a flat out mistake. Once again, send me your screenshots of doing cool things with this. I would love to see how cool you can do this, but like my verdict is no. Don't play this card. It's bad. Next one is Cosmos Elixir, which I don't believe is going to see any limited play at all, but I think is a very cool card for EDH and potentially for Brawl. So this is basically just a 4-mana artifact that says at the beginning of your end step, draw a card if your life total is greater than your starting life total. So if this is EDH, if you have 41 or more life, draw a card. Otherwise, gain 2 life. So the idea is, if you are not already above there, it's not going to give you the card yet, but it'll help build you to the point where it can get you that card. I know that Saffron Olive jokingly tweeted that like this might be the best. This is probably the best white card out of the set. And of course, the joke is it's not actually a white card. But I also, and he also acknowledged this after the fact, but like low-key, that's not a joke. I think this card is actually just really good because, like, as we all know, like white does do life gain, right? It has a lot of incidental, situational life gain. And this is a really good way to leverage the life gain into card advantage, which is something that white does struggle with. So I think this is actually a really cool design. I honestly even would have liked seeing it be I would have even liked seeing it be actually like 3 and a white, so that white could actually just fully lay claim to this. But it doesn't need to be. It's not the end of the world. But I think this is actually a really cool card. And this is likely to be one of those cards that winds up being randomly really expensive a few years from now because of how unique the effect is and how reasonably strong it is in the decks that want it. So don't sleep on this card. Like, this is the kind of card, like, I'm not big on speculation and stocks and buying things or whatever, but like, this is the kind of card that I'm pretty sure you can probably get a playset for on the cheap. What do we think this card is worth? Let's look it up. What do you think it's pre-selling for? Is it here yet? Is the better question. Cosmos Elixir. So it's pre-selling for about $2 US. I would say that that's probably a decent deal. Like, this is the kind of card that could be $5, $10, $15 very, very easily in the future. I might just buy a playset of this just to, like, have them. And if they don't appreciate whatever, I doubt they're going to go much lower than $2. And they could definitely go a lot higher. So, like, if you want my pro MTG stocks tip, that's my spec, is buy Cosmos Elixirs and then sit on them for a while. Anyway, moving on. Funeral Longboat is a 2-mana vehicle. It's a 3/3 vigilance and has crew 1. I actually think this is a very reasonable vehicle, unlike certain vehicles. I actually think this one's totally solid. A 3/3 vigilance and it only needs the crew 1 is a very reasonable body. It attacks and blocks quite well. Yeah, I'm a fan of this card. It's not like a super high pick or anything, but if my deck cares about attacking, like if this is going to go in most of your sort of like lower curve aggro decks pretty happily, I think. Next one is Gold Vein Pick. It's a 2-mana equipment, gives +1/+1, and it has equip 1. And then it says whenever this deals damage to a player, notably just the player, not deals damage period, create a treasure token. I don't think this is very good. Frankly, I just don't. Like 2 mana to play, 1 to equip, and it gets +1/+1 is like medium. And the fact that you only get the treasure when you hit face and not just hit period is like also If you really want an equipment, there are frankly worse in this set than this. This is like somehow one of the better equipments in this set, if we're being honest. But it's not very good. And I would not be prioritizing it. This card is hilarious. This card I don't think this card is good in limited. I could be wrong about that. It does have 3 mana make a 2/2 every turn. And again, the 3 mana 2/2 is not great, but a 3 mana 2/2 changeling and the fact that you can make one every single turn forever is pretty powerful. The other ability on it is like kind of weird. Creatures you control are every creature type. So basically just all your creatures are changelings, even if they're not changelings. And then the same is true for creature spells you control. And creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So basically all the creatures in your deck are changelings, and all the creatures on the stack that you control on the stack are changelings. It's weird, but kind of cool. I don't think this is very good in limited, but I could be wrong. There was another card from like Modern Horizons or something. Something Bows, yeah, Birthing Bows. So this was 3 mana and it was 4 tapped, create a 2/2 shapeshifter. So this is cheaper than that. This card was, I don't believe, at all playable in that format. This is 1 less. They basically swapped the base cost and the activated cost. I think paying 1 more up front is better because it's cheaper to do the actual thing more often. Like you'll save mana in the long run on this version of it. That being said, I don't know that this is playable either. But again, if the changeling deck is real and or tribal decks are real, like this could be a card, but it's definitely not a card, at least at first glance, that I think is a first pick kind of card. But it is a neat card, and for EDH purposes, like it's really cool. All right, next one is Pyre of Heroes. So 2 mana, sack a creature, search your library. Oh yeah, so this is like the weird birthing pod. This one got previewed a long time ago, like right near the beginning of spoiler season, or even before the official spoiler season, actually. But it's kind of a cool card. So this is a tribal birthing pod, but it's like, so again, this one is less to cast, but more to activate. So 2 mana, and then 2 mana to activate, tap, sack a creature, search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacked creature and has converted mana cost equal to 1 plus that creature's converted mana cost. So basically, it's like Birthing Pod, but they have to share a type. Put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate only as a sorcery. Terrain was not aware. That is this thing. So notably, this costs 3 and a Phyrexian. The other one costs 2, so it is much cheaper on the cast, at least by 1, if not 2, if you're trying to hard cast. But then the flip side is that whereas this one can be 1 and 2 life to activate, the other one is always 2 mana, so that's a little worse. And then the part that's like definitely just actually worse is that this one just sacks any creature to find any other creature that's 1 plus converted mana cost, whereas the other one has to be tribally limited. But that being said, tribal decks gaining a second copy, like green tribal decks gaining a second copy of pod if they already had the first, and non-green tribal decks gaining a birthing pod is a big freaking deal. Again, I think this card is awful in limited. Never play this in limited. You're just not going to do what you want. But I think that in, a blue-black zombie deck, this is a sweet card. This is blue-black zombies getting access to Birthing Pod, and that's pretty powerful. The decks that want this are going to be very happy to have it. And again, I've said this already, but I'll say it again just because it's been a while and it was technically in a different video if you're watching the VOD. But I think it's really cool that what this, like, Kaldheim is not a set that's created a bunch of staples. What it's done is it's created a lot of very powerful cards that are good with very specific cards. So there's not a lot of this goes in every blue deck type cards in this set, or it goes in every white deck or whatever. But what there is a lot of is like, this is really good in this deck, or this goes really well with this commander. And like, that's really cool. Is they're creating a lot of cool niche cards as opposed to just a bunch of generically powerful cards. Which I think is much more in the spirit of EDH to begin with anyway. Okay. Next card, Raider's Carve. 3 mana for a 4/4 vehicle. Of course, remember, it's not actually a 4/4 until you crew it. So 3 mana for a vehicle that has crew 3 to become a 4/4. When it attacks, look at the top card of your library, and if it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. So this isn't quite rampant growth, because if the top card of your library is not a land, it doesn't do that. But basically, when this attacks, you attack with a 4/4, and it will ramp you if the top card of your library happens to be a land, which is, like, not amazing, as I said, but not bad. It's probably not that good at limited, generally speaking. Like, this ability is cool, but it's, like, kind of slow, kind of clunky. You may want to play it, but it's not incredible or anything. You'll have to figure it out for yourself. My gut would be to not play this more often than I do play it, but there are definitely going to be decks that want to. It's not a very high pick, though, and you'll probably be able to wheel this card. All right, Raven Wings, 2 mana equipment. This creature has +1/+0, has flying, and is a bird, in addition to its other types. I don't really know how this equipment just turns you into a bird, but it does, I guess. Flavor Judge is still out on this one, but it's kind of cool. And then 2 to equip, so +1/+0 and flying, and if being a bird is relevant ever, great. That seems mostly like flavor text to me, but hey. Don't play this card. It's very unlikely to be good. Cards like this have existed for a long time, and they're all, like, pretty much always bad. Next card is Replicated Ring, which is maybe not a good card, but a very cool card. So 3 mana tap, add 1 mana of any color. So again, this is like the Manalith we were looking at earlier. It's a 3 mana rock, adds for any color. It is a snow artifact, so again, this does make snow mana relevantly. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a night counter on the ring. Then if it has 8 or more counters on it, remove all of them and create 8 colorless snow artifact tokens named Replicated Ring with tap, add 1 mana of any color. So basically, you play this on turn 3, and then, assuming no shenanigans with, like, Proliferate or whatever, 8 turns later, it makes 8 untapped multicolor mana for you. I don't know how often that's going to be a relevant thing. Like, waiting 8 turns for your, like, questionable payoff is not exactly good. It's a very cool card. It's a very flavorful card. It's a very, like, fun card, but I don't think it's a good card. Whether or not you want this card is going to come down to whether or not you just want the Manalith, basically. So again, I think this deck, if you're playing a snow deck, my gut is to say that you want this. Project's off to bed, looks like. Good night, brother. Awesome stream, very informative. Can't wait to see. Yeah, I hope to see that as well. And yeah, glad you enjoyed the stream. We'll see you again. I don't think I'm streaming tomorrow, but I will definitely be streaming, I believe, on Friday. Yeah. But anyway, yep, take it easy till then. So yeah, basically, whether or not you want this card is going to come down to whether or not snow mana is important for you or not. If it's not, you definitely don't want it, and even if it is, it's, like, maybe not that good. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this, but maybe I'm undervaluing it. Oh, all right. Well, a couple, one last posture, one last hydration for the road. Much obliged. I appreciate that. All right, so Rune Crown is our next one. So this is an equipment. It says when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library, hand, and or graveyard for a rune card and put it onto the battlefield attached to Rune Crown. So basically, this is actually not bad, assuming you have runes in your deck, because this is basically a way to, like, get card advantage out of your runes. because like it essentially draws you 2 cards, right? Because not only does it add the boon of what, so this is colorless, so it works with any of the runes regardless of what color deck you are in. And then so the rune goes on, attaches to it, does the thing the rune does, draws you an additional card. So it's essentially taking a rune, it's drawing you the rune, and then the rune then draws you a new card. So this is basically divination. This card is basically divination, except one of the cards you drew is always a rune. Which is obviously worse than actual divination, but it has the upside of also just being an equipment at that point. So if you're playing this in like the green deck, you go get the one that gives like +1/+1 trample. So now you have an equipment that for 3 mana that for 2 mana to equip gives target creature +2/+2 trample, and you drew a card when it ETB'd, which is like not that bad. I don't know how good this whole equipment rune shenanigan nonsense is going to be, but that is actually like a pretty interesting little combo there, because yeah, I missed the part where it just puts the rune directly here, which means you get to draw that card right away. So like this actually does represent a decent little bit of card advantage, for not too much work. Scorn Effigy is an interesting one. So this is a 3 mana 2/3, but you can foretell, but the foretell cost is 0. So a lot of people are like, wait, so doesn't this card just cost 2? The answer is sort of yes, because obviously you have to pay 2 to foretell it. But the caveat there is, of course, that if you do pay the 2 to foretell it, you can't cast it the same turn. So I can either cast it for 3 mana right now on this turn, or for 0 mana on any of my subsequent turns. So it depends on what you are trying to do. But it does let you, but this actually also notably, I will say, does work really well in the double spell deck. So in the black-white deck, I expect to see this be pretty good, because you foretell it for 2 on turn 2, and then on a turn where you want to get your second spell, this is literally just a free spell that'll trigger your, if you cast to your second spell this turn stuff. So I can see that deck wanting this, but other than that, it's like pretty weak. All right, then our final artifact / colorless card is Weathered Runestone. So this is literally just Grafdigger's Cage, but it affects non-land permanents as opposed to just creatures. The rest of the type lines are the same. You're never playing this in limited. If you're playing this in limited, you're making a mistake. It's just never going to matter, and you're just playing a random hunk of cardboard that does nothing in your deck. Don't play this card. This is meant to be a hate card for Constructed. This is not a limited card. Do not put this in your limited deck. Lands. All right, there actually are some lands to talk about. They're not just like random duels. So of course there's the cycle of typed snow duels. So these enter the battlefield tapped, but they are snow lands, which of course means they make snow mana, and also relevantly they are fetchables. So that's not going to be relevant to limited, obviously, but when it comes to EDH, that's a big deal. Having these lands be fetchable, searchable off of, like, you know, search a library for target forest card, put it into play, that kind of thing, is really, really good. I know for a fact that I have several decks that are interested in that. You can find them using Into the North as well, since they're snow lands. These are quietly, like, very, very powerful. And yes, they do come into play tapped, so they're not, like, you know, better than dual lands or shock lands or anything. But I think that these cards are, like, low-key pretty important for Commander mana bases for a number of reasons. And I'm pretty excited that these exist, quite honestly. So I'm going to skip over these. Like, they're all quite pretty and they have cool names, but I'm going to skip over them because they're all the same card with different land types. What I am going to not skip over, though, is the cycle of tribal lands. So the first one is Axgard Armory. So it's these lands are all uncommon ETB tap lands that tap for 1 color of the tribe's pair. So this is the dwarf land. So this is a red. This is red and white, but it only taps for a white. It has 4 and sack, so essentially 5 mana because you have to sack this land, aka sacrificing that mana. So basically, essentially, like, yeah, 4 and tap, sack it, search the library for an aura card and or an equipment card, reveal them, and then put them in your hand. So I will say that the first time I looked at this card, I missed the and or clause. I thought it was just or. So you either look for an aura or for an equipment. And I was like, that's okay. Again, spell lands are generally powerful because they're basically, they tap for mana, but then if you want to just convert them into an actual resource, you get to do that at, like, without needing to play a random spell that does that in your deck. It's just a land that is later a spell. But the fact that this actually essentially draws you 2 cards and you get to tutor for them, they are specific cards, you deliberately want to go get them, is really powerful. I think that I would argue that most Voltron decks that are red-white based are going to be interested in playing this card. Like, this is really good in things like Zergo, in things like Oh, the new one. What's her face? Well, the pre-con one from Zendikar, like Wily or whatever it's called. And then there's the core that cares about that kind of. There's a bunch of Boros commanders that are for sure very interested in this card. Like, so I think this is really cool. It's very specific. It's very niche. But the decks that want this is a strong effect to have at just a staple to a land. The next one in that cycle is Bredegard Stronghold. So this one taps for a green out of the two possible colors, and then it's 3 tap sack. Put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. Then they gain vigilance and lifelink until end of turn. But you can only do this anytime you can cast a sorcery. I think that this card is powerful. It harkens back to oh my goodness, Lord, It's a card from Innistrad block. It's definitely worse. Gavany Township, that's what it is. So this card is a throwback to Gavany Township. Hello. Where basically for 4 tap, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. That's the card. That's what it does. This card is much better, but notably it's also a rare, to be fair. This doesn't do quite as much, but it's also an uncommon. And it does tap for colored mana, where the other one doesn't. That's also relevant. The biggest downside is honestly they activate it as a sorcery thing, because you can't like combat trick it. But then again, it does grant vigilance, which is something you'd want to do before going to combat anyway, so like that kind of balances out. Again, if you're in this color pair, I'm pretty hard pressed to think of a reason you don't want to run this in limited. Like, I think all of these, maybe not this one, because if you don't actually have the equipment and auras in your deck, don't do that. Plus, a red-white deck is probably the least likely to want an ETB tapped land in the first place. So this one, maybe not great for limited. Super cool for EDH, as I said. Probably not great for limited. This one, I think, is almost the opposite, where like in EDH, I'd much rather just play Gavany Township for the same basic effect. But in limited, I will always play this in my white-green deck, I'm pretty sure. Because it just like permanently buffs my creatures and lets me do better in combat, which is just cool. Next card is Faithless Haven. So this one's a throwback to Mutavault. So ETB is untapped, which is nice. It's a snow land, also nice. Taps for colorless mana, but it is colorless snow mana. And then for 3 mana, it becomes a 4/3 creature with vigilance, and all creature types till end of turn, but it remains a land as well. So it can still tap for mana, despite also being that creature. So essentially it costs you 4 mana because you also have to attack with this card. But it doesn't fully cost you 4 mana because it does still get to attack after the fact. So it really is just 3 mana plus having this land available. I think this card is super cool. You're not going to play this in your limited decks unless you have a lot of snow mana, because triple snow, and the fact that this is a snow land, but you can't use it or else it's going to be tapped, and that doesn't work. So having 3 other snow lands able to activate this is a little dubious. But if you can do it, I think it's a really good payoff. Like a 4/3 vigilance, like that's also a land, is ridiculously strong. I think this will see a lot of play in constructed for sure. In EDH, it's going to depend on how much you care about the creature lands, I should say. It's not amazing, but I think this is going to be, but in Brawl, this is likely to be good. I think Brawl might find a home in Brawl. The next one is Gates of Istfell. So this is the white and blue land. It taps for a white. And you can pay 5 and sack it to gain 2 life and draw 2 card. So, the immediate comparison here is Memorial. That's what I'm thinking. It's the blue Memorial. Memorial to Wisdom, Genius. So it very much harkens back to this card, which is 5, tap, sack, draw 2. This one notably is mono blue, so you can play it in any blue deck, whereas this one you have to play the blue and white deck. But the upside of gaining the white is that you do gain 2 life. Very marginal upside, I'm aware, but still, it's white, so I guess it's gaining some life. I wish we could do better than that, but alas, Wizards still seems very firmly set on being like, gain life is white and draw cards is blue. Anyway, a fine land, and again, if I'm playing a blue-white deck, I'm almost always going to include 1 copy. I don't think I'd ever want multiples, because you really don't want too many enter the battlefield tap lands, but the first one of these is always good, because in the late game, it helps you stabilize a little bit and gives you more fuel to kind of try to power through to a win. So this card is really, really strong and limited, I think. Again, we've already talked about these ones. The next spell land is Not Bold Slumbermound. Kind of a fun name to say. So this one taps for red. But then for 6 and tap, you get to sacrifice it, destroy target land, and make a 4/4 green troll warrior token with trample. So basically, more or less for 7 mana, it's blow up a land, make a 4/4. I think you do play this in most of your limited decks, because in the late game, just hating on one of their lands, and hey, maybe you actually get to hate on one of their spell lands. Maybe they haven't had a chance to activate theirs yet. You can activate this, blow up their spell land, which is not nothing, and then you also just get a 4/4 out of it with trample, which is like a solid little body, solid big body even, I should say. So again, I think I would always play this in my limited decks. On the flip side, I don't really think I like this card. I mean, it's probably okay in Brawl, where it's 1v1. I think this card is markedly worse in EDH, though, and I would not play it in my EDH decks. But I would play it in Brawl. Next one is Great Hall of Starnheim. This one confused me, because I definitely thought that this would be a white tapping land just because of the color scheme, but it is in fact a black land. And it has 3 and tap, sack it and a creature, make a 4/4 white angel token. And you can only do this with flying and vigilance. So basically 4 mana, make a 4/4, but you also have to give up like a rando little creature or something. It's not nothing, which is also why I think it's got one of the cheapest activation costs, because it's got a slightly steep additional cost. So they like make up for that by giving you a pretty cheap mana cost to activate. Again, I'm probably going to play this in all of my black-white decks. It is quite strong, just like getting to randomly turn one of your lands and discarding like a rando nonsense creature, like a 1/2 or a 1/1 or something, and just getting a 4/4 flying vigilance. Like, that's just a very good card in limited. So yeah, I would always play this. More dual lands. The next one is Immersturm Skullcairn. This one is quite nice as well. Taps for a black, and then 4 and tap, sack it. Deal 3 damage to target player, and that player discards a card. So this gives you reach. Basically, this kind of calls back to Ramunap Ruins a little bit, where you can just kind of deal those final few points of damage or soften your opponent up so your last attack gets there. Things like that. Basically, having damage built into a land, even if it's not a lot of damage, honestly, and the fact that it can only go to face, is not bad, because again, the only cost is including one tapped black, like a tapped swamp in your deck, basically, which is a very low cost. And then randomly they discard a card. Maybe they don't have a card to discard. Maybe they do. That's kind of just gravy. My personal opinion is this card should have just been discard 2 cards. Like, have it just be a direct callback to... hopefully it gives me the thing, despite the fact that I horribly misspelled it. Nope. Okay, yeah. Callback to this card, which is deal 3 damage to target player. That player discards 2 cards for 1 black-red. I think it would have been much more flavorful for the land to just be a lightning, but maybe that'd be too good. I don't know. It still costs 5 at the end of the day. So 5 mana to give yourself lightning on a land 1 time seems reasonable to me. But again, I don't work for R&D. They clearly had reasons. Anyway, I still think you play this in every limited deck again. It's probably not great in EDH, but again, if you're playing Brawl, I think that it is good. Discard effects are much better when you're playing 1v1 than when you're playing 1v3. The next 2 are my personal favorites, and I'm like super excited about both of these. So the first one is Lityara Mirror Lake. So this one taps for a blue, and it has 5 and tap, sack it, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it, and you can only do it at sorcery speed. So basically, you can just turn your land into a clone, which is like really good. Like, just randomly, like, oh, I have this good creature. I kind of have some mana lying around, like, I don't need it. Like, you're not always going to do this, but like, basically, this just says that if you have a good creature on board, you can just make another one of it, and it's bigger. And all you have to do is like cash in a land and spend some mana. Like, this is just very, very, very strong. Now, notably, it's only you control, so if your opponent has a crazy bomb, that's not going to help you, unfortunately. But it's still very, very good. And again, this is one that I actually think is ubiquitously playable in Limited, EDH, and Brawl. Like, I'm definitely putting this into at least one of my EDH decks. Like, I'm very excited about this card. It's just very good and very cool. And then, again, same basic idea. Port of Carfell, again, taps for a blue. And this one is 6 tap sack. Mill 4 cards, and return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So, 2 things. First of all, self-mill synergies are real. People play Muldrotha decks. I have a Sidisi deck. The self-mill is a real thing. Then there's the fact that the creature that you can return doesn't have to be part of the 4 that were milled. It just kind of fuels you in case you had no other creatures in your yard somehow. But if you just milled over a bunch of like medium stuff, we had this really cool card that died a few turns ago and it's just been sitting there. You can bring that one back. It doesn't have to be the four cards you milled. And then on top of that, yes, it comes back to the battlefield tapped, but the flip side of that is unlike a lot of these cards, this one doesn't have to be done at sorcery speed. You can literally do this at the end of your opponent's turn and then untap with the creature that you just got back. And again, it doesn't cost you a spell slot. It only costs you a land slot to do this. This is really powerful. It's a very expensive effect. Like, it costs 7 mana total to do this, so you're not going to get to do it every game. But like, I cannot overstate the power of putting powerful spell effects on lands, because you basically get to like, you're not going to need 10 mana. Like, this basically says that like once you hit your 7-8 mana mark in a limited deck, you get to just cash one of those in for like a full-on spell effect, except that you still have all your spells in your deck. You didn't have to play extra lands to do this or something, or extra spells. It's just really, really good. Like, yeah, so both of these I'm extremely excited about. These are the two best ones of the spell lands, in my opinion, though I do believe that Axgard Armory is extremely good in the Boros decks that are equipment based. And then I think Gaze of Isfel is just a solid card. Again, there are other versions of that effect that are probably better, but it's a good version of the effect regardless. Next land of note is Summerdrift Vale or Shimmerdrift Vale. So this is just a snow land. ETB's tapped, but you can make it tap for any color you want. You choose a color. It's not any color all the time, but you choose a color, and then it just taps for that color from now on. So it's a weird version of mana fixing, and it's snow mana fixing, notably. This is very similar to like Evolving Wilds, actually. In that when you play Evolving Wilds, yes, it's untapped, but you crack it and find a tapped basic. This is essentially cracking the Evolving Wilds for a snow land that taps for one color. So basically, in any deck you want Evolving Wilds, you want Shimmerdrift Vale. This is really just a riff on Evolving Wilds that doesn't involve sacrificing a land and searching for another land. But the effect is ultimately that you end up with a single color land of the color of your choice, but you can't use it that turn. Again, you probably don't need this unless you're either really hard up for fixing or you're a snow deck. But in the snow decks, this will be great. And if you really are trying to splash like a cool off-color card, this is a good way to do that. Our next spell land is the Skemfar Elder Hall. So this is the Elves one, the black-green one. This is probably one of the worst ones because of how narrow it is. So this is 5 tap sack up to 1 target creature you don't control gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and then you get 2 1/1 green elf warrior tokens, and you can only use it at sorcery speed. I think that the fact that you can only do this at sorcery speed is a big part of why it's not very good. If you were able to hold this up as a removal / like ambush blockers, etc., like there would be a lot more play to it and it would be much more interesting. The fact that you just have to like proactively like kill their X2 and make 2 1/1s for like 6 mana basically is like, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this one. I do think that you'll probably still end up playing it if you're a black-green deck because the opportunity cost is so low, but it's not that exciting. Next one is, this might be actually the last one of the spell lands, if I'm not mistaken. I think it is. So the last of the spell lands is Surtland Frostpyre. So this is 5 and tap, sack it, scry 2, and then deal 2 damage to each creature. So it's basically a scry 2 Pyroclasm for obviously a lot more than that spell would cost. But again, it's a land. So you're getting a spell effect, and this is a powerful one. Pyroclasm is a very good spell effect out of it for very minimal cost. So again, I would always play this in my in my green, in my blue-red decks. And I would probably play this in Brawl. I don't think I'd play it in EDH. The deal 2 is a little bit more marginal there, but there's a lot of there's actual aggro decks in Brawl. And this does a really decent job of like cleaning up an aggro deck and setting yourself up. Yeah. Pretty close to done, yep. So next one is Tyrite Sanctum. So this isn't part of a cycling thing, it's just kind of a standalone. It's a bit of a weird card. So it's an ETB, it ETB's untapped, it taps for colorless. You can pay 2 and tap to make target legendary creature become a god in addition to its other types and put a counter on it. So the becoming a god part is like kind of like whatever, but the +1/+1 counter is kind of fine. Notably, you can also target the same creature multiple times. Like it'll just like it won't become a god multiple times, but you get to keep putting counters on it. And then eventually you can also put you can also pay 4 and tap sack 4 tap sack it and put an indestructible counter on target god. So basically you just make the creature that you upgraded just permanently indestructible. It's a little weird, but it's kind of cool. I don't exactly know how good this card actually is, but it's definitely the kind of card that could be pretty sweet. Because notably that counter doesn't go away, right? Like it just is now indestructible. So that could be kind of cool. I definitely could see this being, yeah, like this is a neat little card. I don't think it's worth playing in EDH. Oh, sorry, I don't think it's worth playing in Limited. Colorless lands are pretty. It's pretty costly to include colorless lands in your deck unless they're very good, and this doesn't strike me as being good enough. Especially because it needs a legendary creature to begin with to do anything. So I don't think you're ever trying to play this in Limited realistically. But it is cool. It is cool. And probably reasonable in Brawl and EDH. We're moving on. Okay, so the World Tree. The World Tree is like definitely a very interesting land. This one has got a lot of people talking. It was very controversial to a lot of people that this card was not legendary, despite having like a proper noun for a name. People were like making the same point about Valakut years ago, where Valakut is like very much like Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. It's like literally classic legendary naming conventions, but it's just not legendary. But it is what it is. It's like not the end of the world. Anyway, this enters the battlefield tapped, and it taps for a green. But then it has the very interesting ability of if you control 6 or more lands, and that includes itself, add 1 mana. It has all my lands now just become rainbow lands, and just say add 1 mana of any color, which is pretty cool. So basically, this is like excellent fixing in your 5-color deck. So if you're playing a Sisei deck or a Golos deck, especially in Golos, this is absurd. Because basically, if you have 5 mana for Golos, you go get this with Golos. It's now your 6th land. Guess what? Now all your lands tap for rainbow mana. Like that's ridiculous. It didn't take a lot to break Golos, to be fair. Like I don't think this is what broke Golos. It's been broken already, but it is very cool. And it is a very strong ability. And then it also has like this really wacky off the wall additional ability of for double Wooburg, you can tap it and sack it to search your library for any number of god cards, put them on the battlefield, and shuffle your library. So there's been a lot of god cards over the years now. There's the God Eternals. There's the actual Amonkhet gods before they became God Eternals. There's all the gods from Theros. There's probably maybe, and obviously there's the new Kaldheim gods. I think that might be it, but that's still like quite a few cards. There's a lot of nonsense basically, and you can just literally just pull them all out onto the battlefield directly. I think someone figured out there's like pretty easy ways that you can just insta-win by doing this. I haven't really thought about it, but like even just Perforos plus pulling out like a bunch of other gods is going to generate like a ton of Perforos ETB triggers. So like that unto itself is pretty goddamn powerful. And like Xenagos can power up one of them. Anyway, there's lots of nonsense you can do with that is the bottom line. So yeah, I've seen people talking about playing like, Corona False God Tribal EDH, which like sounds pretty cool to me, honestly. I would love to see somebody just actually pull this last ability off and win the game. That sounds great. Like that sounds like you deserve it. And I think that's it for the non-basic lands. Now we've just got our sort of sweet, pretty snow cover lands. I don't actually like all of these. I think this one is very nice. This one is medium. I don't really like, either of the islands. I don't really like either of the swamps. Both of the mountains are quite pretty, I believe. Again, this is all very subjective opinions. And then this forest is quite nice, but then I don't like this forest. But again, that's whatever. All right. I'd actually forgotten about this. There's still the MDFCs. We haven't looked at any of the gods yet. So that's going to be our last section. And I'm going to send you all to one last ad break before we get to that. So hang tight, and I'll see you in a minute.